Penn State isn't just some fringe national title contender next season. No, they're one of the perennial ones, and they remind me a lot of this recent championship team.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show, and Penn State is not just some fringe title contender next season. No, they are one of the clear favorites going into this upcoming season, and they remind me a lot of Michigan as one of the recent national championship teams. The formula is there for Penn State to go on a title run, and they are very similar to that Michigan Wolverines team. Let's leave the Connor Stallions discourse aside. I want to compare and contrast how Penn State is built like this Michigan team, which is why I think they are one of the perennial contenders going into next season. Of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section to be a part of this conversation. So here's how Penn State will do it. I'm going to talk about why this team is so strong and how the roster is laid out as well. Let's get into the fact that Penn State is going to lean on the ground game just like Michigan did. And one could argue that Penn State's ground game is set up better than Michigan's from that championship team. Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen should have gone off to the NFL. They didn't. It's kind of the same argument that Blake Corum, hey, he could have gone off to the NFL early. He decided to come back. He had a good complimentary RB2 in Donovan Edwards, but that was it. There was your bell cow running back with Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards as a guy to rotate in frequently, whereas Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen are co-starters. They are both RB1. There's not a clear gap between who is better. They are good, they are great, they are elite at different things. But overall, these guys could start anywhere, and they could both be the full-time running back number one if Penn State needed them to, but that's the luxury of it. You have two RB1s in this offense, and I feel like Penn State is going to use them more than just that. Normally, they'll rotate them through, and it's a timeshare. I expect Singleton and Allen to be on the football field together a lot more than we have seen in the past, and I'll explain that a little more in just a moment. But when you look at it, okay, so Michigan had that depth at running back, and particularly those two key running backs. Blake Corum went for 1,200 yards, and Donovan Edwards went for 500 in that national championship season. Singleton and Allen are both coming off individually 1,000-yard rushing yard seasons. 1,000 yards apiece. They are truly co-starters at running back. Now, I know, I got to point out, because I'm going to get the comments from many Michigan fans, but 27 touchdowns for Blake Corum. Did Michigan have Tyler Warren or Bo Pribula goal line packages devoted to specialty players? No. Blake Corum was always going to get fed the football at the goal line. Penn State either went to Singleton, Allen, Tyler Warren, Bo Pribula. Drew Aller had 6 rushing touchdowns for Penn State. So you might point out that, oh, well, Blake Corum scored a lot of touchdowns. That's because it all went to him. Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki spread the football out when they were getting inside the red zone, particularly close to the goal line. But then there's the running back depth behind them. So I mentioned Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen being on the field at the same time. You didn't see that at all, frankly, with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Penn State has the flexibility to do that with the depth that they have built at running back. That is a testament to J1 Sider and being able to keep these guys happy, because Singleton and Allen coming back. Now, I know there's the spring transfer portal window, but let's talk about the way this thing sets up right now. Cam Wallace is coming back from injury. Corey Smith is trending in the right direction as a potential rising breakout player who's going to see an increased role just because he's a talented football player. So if you're going to have Singleton and Allen on the football field for a lot more plays, you're going to need that key running back depth. Oh, and don't forget about Quentin Martin, one of the top recruits, one of the top running back recruits overall in that class of 2024. He is now a redshirt freshman. He's going into his second year like his fellow teammate in Corey Smith, and you have both of them. Don't forget, running backs can catch the football. It's not going to just be about pounding the rock, but leaning on the running backs, maybe is a better way to phrase it. They're going to lean on the ground game. Andy Kotelnicki and Penn State ran the ball 600 times, over 600 times in the 2024 season. I expect the same. Who knows, maybe even a little more in 2025. But that is the strength of this team. A ground game and an elite defense. That is the blueprint characteristically for NFL, college, high school football teams that are at the top. They need a strong ground game, running back depth, and an elite defense. Penn State's defense would be elite once again. And I'm going to talk about Drew Aller as well. This elite defense, it was top 10 under Tom Allen. It was top 3 under Manny Diaz. Now, this is bold talk for a team that at this present moment is still working things out at defensive coordinator, and that's probably going to change not too far behind this conversation. But you have, yes, you are losing Abdul Carter, but they are getting elite playmakers back in Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant. Those are the faces of your defense. And then A.J. Harris, Tony Rojas are expected to step up. You have defensive veterans returning, a Smith Vilbert, a Dom DeLuca. All of these players are going to, and then the depth behind them. So you have a solid first 11, and I didn't even mention Zach Wheatley yet, or a Zion Tracy or an Elliott Washington. So I could go name by name by name, but that's my point. Is that like Michigan in that 2023 season going into the 2024 playoff, is that they had all of those faces that were easily recognizable by name that got that they had a top 5 defense. I think Penn State, with what it has offensively in its ground game, and then if you get, honestly, I don't want to say that anybody could be Penn State's defensive coordinator, but it would be, let's say this, very difficult to mess up the setup that Penn State has on the defensive side of the football. And that's the argument that was against Tom Allen, that, hey, they could let him go because somebody else would be able to succeed with this group. That very well might be true. Penn State could actually be even better than what Tom Allen was giving them as a top 10 group. This group, once again, has potential being top 5 in the nation, and that gets you a national championship. At least gets you to be in the conversation as being one of the favorites. Because I know there's Texas. I know that Georgia's going to reload. My point is that Penn State is in that category with them. And don't worry, I'm going to mention Ohio State and Oregon too, but in a different category. I have to talk about Drew Aller and J.J. McCarthy before we go to break. J.J. McCarthy made smart, sound decisions. He was a veteran quarterback, and he could pick up first downs with his legs. Was he elite? Did he need to be an elite playmaker? At times, yes, but the game was never put squarely on his shoulders. And Drew Aller, going into his 4th year of college football, 3rd year starting, 2nd year in Andy Kotelnicki's offense, the comments are going to say, oh, it's James Franklin, it's Drew Aller. Look how he played in that game against Notre Dame. Okay, but that was that version of Drew Aller. The 4th year, 3rd year of starting, 2nd year of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, that version of Drew Aller, 1 more year of experience, he is going to be a much different quarterback than he was a season ago, specifically in that semifinal game. My point in the comparison of J.J. McCarthy is that you had somebody that was reliable, that was trustworthy, that had played in a number of games of college football, that just didn't make those costly mistakes. And up until the Notre Dame game, the Orange Bowl, Drew Aller did not do that. So there are similar parallels. Drew Aller is not a statue. He's also somewhat of a mobile quarterback. Does he have breakaway speed? All the jokes about how James Franklin compares him to Lamar Jackson. Okay, that's obviously a stretch. But Aller is not your prototypical pocket passer that's a statue like a Peyton Manning and a Tom Brady. No, he can move. He has actually very good pocket mobility and is able to sidestep defenders. Look at other games. I'm not just saying this just because. Look at the other games throughout the season where it is very difficult to bring Drew Aller down. Big Ten defenses will attest to that just because naysayers, internet comments might say differently. So Drew Aller is going to be a key in this alongside Singleton and Allen, and the fact that they're getting ready to reload on defense as well. And there's always an opportunity to add in the spring transfer portal window. Now, there are 2 underlying factors here of why Penn State is going to be a perennial national title contender. One of them is which they have the foundation that other Big Ten teams do not have going into next season. I'll tell you about it more on the other side of this break. This message is brought to you by Prizepicks, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of the football action. And now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that is right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple selections. And you can choose anybody that is playing in the postseason. For example, you could take more than or less than Jalen Hurts' passing yards, or Travis Kelce for more or less than his receiving yards. It's fun to predict, easy to play. Plus, with the Prizepicks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. And with the app, you get the winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Get ready to run your game this football postseason. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. That is Prizepicks. Run your game. Let's talk about the Big Ten landscape, because Penn State arguably might be the favorite in its own conference. Forget the national title talk for just a moment. Penn State, with what it has returning, Ohio State can't say the same thing. Oregon can't say the same thing. Michigan, USC, Indiana, they are all chasing after a quarterback. Now, I know there's Julian saying at Ohio State that, hey, they have the quarterback in waiting. How much experience does he have? When you compare it to Drew Aller, 4th year in college football, 3 years starting at the same program, and 2nd year going into the same offense. That is a luxury for Penn State. Dylan Gabriel is moving on. Will Howard is moving on. Michigan went into the portal and got a different quarterback. There is not that same type of consistency. USC moved on from Miller Moss. So when the top teams that are going to contend for a Big Ten title, I imagine that Indiana is going to try to make another run as well under Curt Cignetti. They don't have the same type of foundation. They are losing faces of the team, faces of the program, because they had to go with those makeshift changes that weren't long-term solutions at the end of the day. And for Ohio State, it certainly paid off, but the same can't be said for everybody else. Penn State has that consistency that you need at the most important position at football. Oh, and at the same time, returning not 1, but 2 1,000-yard rushers from a season ago. And they are going into their 4th year of college football. And arguably, Singleton and Allen, they have started for 4 years since they were freshmen. So they are 4-year returning starters, and you get them both back at running back. That's almost unheard of. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. Find me the last time that you saw 2 running backs come back to a team for the 4th season and be 4-year consecutive starters. That's unprecedented for the 2025 season. That's unprecedented, I think, in college football. And the case is that's the same case for Denai Dennis Sutton and a Zane Durant. Not necessarily the 4 years of starting, but that 4th year of college football, their 2nd or 3rd year of starting. It's these veteran impact players that are going to turn the corner and become even better than they were before. So just because, they did this in this game when they were sophomores and juniors, this is the senior year version of these players. They're only going to get better, because I think the discourse was pretty similar about J.J. McCarthy, that he's not ready, he can't take the next step. Same thing's being said about Drew Aller, just because he had a really bad game, and he did have a really bad game. I've said that about him in the aftermath of that loss to Notre Dame. A lot of the responsibility went on Drew Aller. Yes, the wide receivers did not step up. And we will talk about the roster construction here. What is Penn State doing at wide receiver? My point is that one game does not define Drew Aller's career as a player. And he is allowed to get better. He is allowed to still develop. That is why he is coming back to Penn State. But fine. You want to say that about Drew Aller? That's okay. I'm saying that the same discourse was said about J.J. McCarthy, and he led a Michigan team to the national championship. Penn State is very similar to that Michigan team. But Oregon does not have a quarterback returning. Ohio State has Julian Sayin waiting, but who knows if they go into the portal. USC, They have Mayava. Okay. They ended up moving on from Miller Moss, but I'm talking about that consistency. You don't have that third year starter. You don't have the core of your offense coming back. And speaking of the core of your offense, Penn State's offensive line. That is another huge component and one that's just going to be underrated, not talked about because it's not flashy, right? Everybody wants to talk about the quarterback, the running back, the wide receivers. But in Penn State's case, Michigan had the Joe Moore Award winning offensive line that year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that I'll go as far to say that about Penn State's offensive line, but they definitely should be in the running. They certainly should be in consideration because Penn State's offensive line, from Penn State's point of view, has been doing so much better as of late because over James Franklin's tenure, it hasn't been the best setup. But now that Phil Trautwein has had time, has had 3-4 years to really construct this group, and you can see it starting to turn the corner and not be a liability. Okay, they're a net neutral, right? They're okay. They're not great, but they're not bad. This is a group that was peaking against the likes of Oregon, SMU, Boise State. Oh, but that's a group of 5 team. They were still top 10. They were still in the college football playoff. SMU out of the ACC, former group of 5 team, but that was still one of the best front sevens in the country. Penn State's offensive line is returning everybody except Sal Wormley. They are losing 1 starter. They are getting 4 back on an offensive line that was playing its best football against the best competition from the season in Oregon, SMU, Boise State when the games mattered the most. And honestly, against Notre Dame, they put up 200 yards against Notre Dame on the ground as well. Offensive line played extremely well against the best competition in the games that mattered most in the postseason. So now you get a bulk of that starting group back. And you have the depth. Cooper Cousins. Anthony Donko was lost to injury. Nolan Rucci stepped in his place. You're going to get Anthony Donko back, and he's arguably Penn State's best overall offensive lineman. And then you add TJ Shanahan in the transfer portal from Texas A&M, somebody who started half the season and was a former 5-star prospect, according to Rivals, out of the state of Texas, and he comes in as a potential rotational player. They should be in the Joe Moore. I've talked myself into it. That should be one of the groups that is going to be right in the conversation for the best offensive line in the entirety of college football. So there you have it right there. When you look at Michigan when they won a title versus this Penn State team, they have a veteran quarterback. Drew Aller is underrated. He had a bad game that everybody's going to go off of. Fine, it is what it is. Drew Aller. You have a 2-headed monster at running back and one that is better than Michigan's championship-winning duo. I haven't gotten a wide receiver yet, but I'll talk about that in the roster construction in just a moment. The offensive line, the way the defense is setting up, it's there. But do you notice that one thing about Michigan? All the strengths that they had. Penn State, wide receiver, that's a huge issue. The last time I checked, Michigan didn't have those elite playmakers in the passing game. But Roman Wilson had the same amount of yards as Trey Wallace did this past season. So Penn State's going to be just fine without an elite wide receiver. So let's talk about that roster construction. Where are they going to get playmakers in the passing game? How are they going to overcome the loss of Tyler Warren? And who are some of those key breakout players? I'll tell you more on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by TalkSpace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where TalkSpace comes in. TalkSpace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With TalkSpace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, 2 days. And it's convenient. You can have the sessions from the comfort of your home, even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, TalkSpace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener and a viewer of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege, enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. Penn State doesn't need an elite number one wide receiver. And as nice as it would help balance this team out. But this team's going to rely on the ground game. Like I said, they have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, a stable of running backs behind them, and Cam Wallace, Corey Smith, Quentin Martin, and oh yeah, those guys can catch passes. Well, they lost Tyler Warren. Yes, that is a massive loss, but you are getting, like I said, Singleton and Allen back, and there's a lot of depth at the tight end position as well. Luke Reynolds is that next rising superstar at tight end. Things are trending well. He started to make plays down the stretch of the season. There is high optimism that he is going to be that superstar caliber player. But let's not maybe necessarily put those kinds of expectations on him in year two. Just know that he is trending in the right direction and will be a factor in this offense. Khalil Dinkins is there too. Khalil Dinkins was tight end number 2. He will ascend to tight end number 1 and essentially split as that tight end. Think of Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren in that 2023 season before Tyler Warren came back and became a superstar, but that split. That's essentially the same thing here. Theo Johnson, Khalil Dinkins, the veteran tight end, can make plays and block as well. Blocking is going to be very important. Luke Reynolds, the same thing. Tyler Warren starting to come into his own, tap into his potential. Luke Reynolds on a similar timeline. Andrew Rapplier will come back from injury as well. And if you can get him at full strength, that's another third tight end and it will help block for the running back. So you have this talented group at offensive line. You have this group of on the depth chart at tight end and the running backs to go with it and a quarterback that's going to make smart decisions above all else. Plus, they're getting Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross in the transfer portal, and Penn State has every reason to potentially add a third wide receiver in the spring transfer portal window if it works. If it doesn't work, people might not agree with me by saying this, but I am content enough with what Penn State has at wide receiver because they are so strong in so many other position groups. Offensive line. If they're going to be able to block, hold up in protection, you have the ground game to balance things out. You can do a lot of things with play action, misdirection, different types of formations, and Andy Kotelnicki is the perfect play caller, offensive coordinator to construct this kind of offense that's going to be slightly uncharacteristic. It's not going to be Army, Air Force, right? I guess Army's kind of changed things, but traditionally, right? You think of the academy schools and the way that they run offense and stuff. You could see a base formation out of the wishbone where Penn State runs 3 tailbacks. It was shown against West Virginia, but then a few weeks later, Cam Wallace got hurt. So Penn State didn't have the reliability. They didn't trust Corey Smith and Quentin Martin enough, but now that they're going into year 2, you can do that. And you can actually rotate those running backs in more than just Singleton and Allen and a running back and Cam Wallace. Now Quentin Martin can go there. Now Corey Smith can go there. And like I said, running backs can catch passes, so can tight ends. But I like Kyron Hudson. I like Devontae Ross because they give you specialty skills. Throw a pass to Kyron Hudson. He's going to catch just about anything. In this past season for USC, I don't think he had a missed catch. He will be able to get his hands on the football any which way possible. The question about his game is, will he be able to separate? But he can catch in traffic and make those spectacular catches. Look at that highlight against LSU from week 1. And then Devontae Ross. Teams are just going to stack the box against Penn State. Not if you have Devontae Ross going deep down the field, because speed is the name of his game, and then it forces the safeties to play respectable coverage and not just stack the box against Singleton and Allen or whatever that running back combination is going to look like. Penn State's roster is setting up nicely. When I look at Michigan, yes, they had Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson gave them 750 yards roughly. He had a lot of touchdown receptions. Basically, they went to Blake Corum and Roman Wilson. So Penn State doesn't have Tyler Warren, but the ball doesn't need to go to one or two select players. Singleton, Allen. Remember, Drew Aller can run the football too. Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. And then you have at least players that show some optimism. Tyseer Denmark specifically, there was a lot of buzz in training camp from 2024 that he would have that breakout. And maybe in year 2, that's why Penn State didn't go as aggressive as they could have in the winter transfer portal cycle. So Michigan didn't have that elite number 1 wide receiver that took over games, but they had the quarterback that was reliable. the dynamic duo at running back, an elite offensive line, an elite defense, consistency along the coaching staff as well. Penn State's got to fill its defensive coordinator spot, and they shouldn't. I don't think they're going to have any issues doing that. They're going to make the right hire. And then before I finish up, let me talk about some of those other breakout players. Tony Rojas is going into year 3. A.J. Harris is going into year 3. Cooper Cousins is somebody. So I mentioned Tyser Denmark. These players that were already getting playing time, generating buzz at training camp and practice, now go into another year and should be even better because of it. So those are some breakout players to watch. I would look at Elliott Washington and Zion Tracy as well in the secondary. When you have to cover those elite receiving cores at Oregon, at Ohio State, you're going to need the secondary to back it up. Oh, and Penn State got King Mack back from the transfer portal. So things are setting up very nicely for Penn State. They still got to find a defensive coordinator. They're going to make the right hire. This is a coveted job. So all of it's coming together for Penn State. And that's why they are a perennial national title contender for the 2025-2026 season. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Penn State, I do truly believe that they are a legitimate contender, but feel free to agree or disagree down in the comments. If you are new to the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. For all the coverage and conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here, so it's your team every day. We talk about more than just Penn State football, wrestling and basketball as well. So stay tuned for more coverage and more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first when everyone else seems to overlook it. And shout out to the Big Ten Conference for winning a second consecutive national title. For all those conversations around the Big Ten Conference, the entirety of it, check out Locked On Big Ten. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.